Are You Nuts? A Tom and Scott Mystery, Book 7. Author, Mark Richard Zubro. St. Martin's Press, New York. Eric Aust, narrator. Chapter 9. Without touching anything more, I examined the cupboard as best I could, taking great care and using my hanky to touch the encyclopedia. I put all the books back precisely as I had found them, and then I sat down at my desk and considered. I thought about calling the cops or my lawyer, probably both. As I'd bumped the books, I wasn't sure if I'd left my fingerprints on the encyclopedia. If I had, would the detectives believe my excuses? More important, what was the damn thing doing there? Who had put it there? How long had it been there? It was at the opposite end of the room from where the textbooks had been turned around. Was it connected to the murder? How could it be? How could it not be? The cops had the murder weapon. Maybe this was another sick joke by whoever had been sabotaging my room? Or were there two murder weapons? Anything was possible. So far, there had been one thing in my classroom slightly out of kilter at a time, escalating to the computer message. Was this connected to those relatively minor acts of sabotage? Or maybe the computer, the bloody book, and the sabotage were completely unrelated. I had a brief vision of people scampering up and down the halls of Grover Cleveland like the Marx Brothers, manically chuckling as I went slightly goofy. I slowly walked to the exit, eased myself into the hall, and locked the door as best I could. I worried that someone was hiding in the nearby rooms, ready to pounce or laugh at my concern and confusion or accuse me of murder. I found one of the kids doing community service. I asked the nearest custodian if I could borrow the teen for a few minutes. She said sure. I stationed the kid at the door to my room. If anyone tries to get into my room, kill them. He gave me a kind of mopey look. Just kidding. Don't let anyone in. If somebody tries to get in, stop them. Call for help if you have to. This kid proved that you could mix a non-verbal snarl and a nod at the same time. I love teenagers. I walked to the learning center. The crime scene tape was gone. I wanted to find out how many Smith's comprehensive encyclopedias we had originally and how many were missing. It was absurd to think this was the same one, the cop said, of course. The book could have been from another library. It could have been carried into school in a teacher's briefcase or a student's backpack or a gym bag. Between two metallic bookends, I found 4 duplicate volumes. Obviously, Smith's comprehensive encyclopedia was a popular resource. I turned on one of the terminals for the computerized card catalog. It confirmed that the encyclopedias were kept only behind the reference desk, as the cops had said. It also told me they were supposed to be 2 more. I could account for both of them. I gazed out at the stacks of books. I heard the buzz of the clock on the wall behind the checkout desk. I heard it make a soft click. All was mostly silence and the smell of books. I walked to the front of the room and began a circuit, as I imagined Meg had done. I came to a large drop cloth covering one spot on the carpet. I lifted it up. I saw a small dark red stain. They'd probably have to remove only that section of carpet. Nothing leapt out and said, "I'm a clue." I walked back to my classroom. The teenager said nobody had even been down the hallway. He volunteered to help me any time. Not a snarl in sight. I supposed it was easier work than anything else he had to do. He sauntered off. I ascertained that the bloody book was still exactly where I had left it, and nothing around it had been disturbed. I chose to stand at the window and stare out. Random puffs of air tantalized me with the promise of a cooler evening. Mostly I stood, sweated, and thought. Since Meg was such a great suspect, why try to implicate me? What if it came down to a question of her or me as a suspect? What if Meg had put it there to implicate me? And then why a second book in the library? With her prints on it? The murderer put one with Meg's print on it, next to the body, and one here. Why? To implicate both of us? Whose prints were on this one? If it was connected to the murder, why hadn't the killer found a way to let the police know it was here? An anonymous call from payphone was all that was needed. Maybe the killer had put it there and changed his or her mind. Then why hadn't the killer come back and gotten it? It was frightfully easy to break into my room, as was evident. Planting the bloody book could have been done at any moment. Maybe it wasn't the murder weapon at all. What if all the messed up items in my room were connected with the murder? Why would they be? How could they be? One was a set of odd circumstances, with today's message moving beyond the practical joke, simply annoying level. This book implicated me in a crime. Could there be two murder weapons? That seemed unlikely. Had I left a print when I was reaching back for the letters? If this was the murder weapon, what did the police have? The killer bashes Jerome over the head, then gets another encyclopedia and bangs him over the head again? Why? A whimsical killer? An extremely clever killer? This certainly seemed to eliminate Meg as the murderer. Why leave one book with your fingerprints on it near the body and hide this one? Unless you were interrupted in what you were doing, or somebody saw Meg do what she did and then planted her purse and a second murder weapon near the body, which would mean she was trying to implicate me and some guardian spirit or raving loony wanted to implicate her. But then, why wouldn't that guardian spirit remove the book from my room? Even more, what was I going to do about the bloody thing? Any moment, hordes of police, tipped off by a crazy killer, could swoop into my room. This thought made me uneasy. My classroom door swung open. I looked over at the cupboard. I'd covered any telltale signs carefully. My imagination conjured up a neon arrow pointing to a large black X on the spot. My heart beat faster and extra sweat oozed from my pores. Carolyn Blackburn did not stare meaningfully in that direction. "How was Meg?" she asked. "Not good." I gave her a brief synopsis, leaving out the hurtful things Meg had said, and a request for me to do nothing. "Is she going to come back to work?" I asked. "That's the latest controversy. The Fire Meg immediately crowd has learned that you can't just dump someone unceremoniously. Due process has to happen. Innocent until proven guilty will prevail in this district, if I have anything to do with it. If she's found innocent, will you keep her here?" "I won't recommend she be fired. I can't speak for the board. Lydia's doing her best to cause an uproar." "Maybe Lydia's the real killer. I hear she and Jerome had some difficulties." "That's more than I know. Do Belutha and Lydia get along?" "You know, it's odd now that you mention it." "What?" "They were on the same side in the election and all the controversies, but I've never noticed them being friendly with each other." "You'd think they would be." I mentioned Lydia confronting me in the hall the day before. Carolyn nodded. "She's a tough case." She was standing near my desk and eyeing the chart I had started at home and brought to school. Do the police have everyone's movements on the night of the killing?" I asked. "I don't know." She gazed carefully at my handiwork. "You've got everybody on the list." "Everybody who I know was there." "Including me?" "Well, yeah." If it were me, I'd put every possible name. Saving a friend is important. I wondered if I was still doing that or saving my own butt. She made several suggestions of people and times I could fill in, then left. I decided the smartest thing I could do was call my lawyer. I did the guard the door thing again. I hurried to call from the English department office. Todd wasn't in. I asked the secretary to page him. "Is this an emergency?" she demanded. I assured her it was. Todd called back moments later. "I'm on a recess from court. I've got a chance of winning $1 million settlement in the next half hour. This better be important." Rachel was working in a corner. Several other people were on the other side of the room drinking soda. I put my lips on the receiver and cupped my hands around it. I felt like a cheap gangster in a low-budget 1940s crime movie. I spoke slowly, softly, and distinctly. "In my classroom, there is a bloody encyclopedia hidden behind some books." "Go to your classroom. Stay there. Let no one in. If someone comes to the door, speak to them in the hall. Do nothing until I arrive." So I returned to my room and did nothing. And that's not quite true. I sweated and I worried a lot. I hadn't dared continue working on my room. Who knew what fingerprints I might be erasing or adding? By 3:30, I was bored beyond words. I thought of trying to get some work done on my computer. Would the bloody dictionary depositor have touched those keys? He or she would have if he or she was the same person who was trying to mess with my mind. I brooded about that problem for a while. I dared to look in my desk drawers for something to do. It already had to have 1,000,000 of my fingerprints on it. In the bottom drawer of my desk, I found a paperback book left by one of my students last year. I'd forgotten the thing. The cover and the first 10 pages were missing. It was a ghastly, torrid teenage torture opus. I was bored. I read it. At 3:55, Kurt swung open my classroom door. As much to keep him out as eagerness to see him, I hurried to meet him. I used our embrace to steer him closer to the door. "It's cooler in the hall," I said as I ushered him out the door. "How are you?" I managed to ask, with a credible display of interest considering the circumstances. "I'm terrific. Doing nothing all summer has a great deal to recommend it." He looked wonderfully tan and fit. He must have lost at least 20 pounds. He said, "I heard about Meg. How is she?" "Awful." I told him about everything except what was sitting in my classroom. He shook his head when I told him what Meg had done at the courtroom. "She didn't mean what she said, I'm sure," Kurt said. "You're probably her best friend here. She must have just been in shock." "I agree. You've got some solid information. That Belusa versus Lydia stuff has got to lead somewhere. I want to talk to them, but I don't know how I'm going to get them to open up." "I'm not sure either. On the other hand, you could call the police anonymously and say Bellatrix killed him." "Don't tip me." I gave him a detailed account of Beatrix's ravings. "I hope I don't run into her," Kurt said. "Listening to that woman is the equivalent of having a dentist clean your teeth with a chainsaw." "How's Scott after all that touring and publicity?" "Okay, I think. I'm a little worried." I explained about how depressed Scott was. "I don't know," Kurt said. "I think that's what's been missing in your guys' relationship. Metaphysical angst about your sexuality. I think you'd be a lot more popular, get on more talk shows, coming out, going back into the closet, having a revolving door in the closet. It has a ring to it. Popular culture likes their gay people depressed or dying. You guys aren't dying, are you?" "No." Then go with depressed." "You don't think it's serious?" "I think he loves you deeply. He knows who he is. He was in pain, like he said. It was a low moment. He doesn't hate himself. Was he as affectionate as ever?" "Yeah." "So, it was a momentary aberration. He's the most celebrated gay figure in America, and you're right in there with him. Be happy. Be strong. You'll both be fine." "I wish I had your confidence." "Did you see the propaganda Seth put out about the election?" Kurt laughed. "I've done a good job. I'm sure he's embarrassed about putting out something that stupid." "I wasn't so sure about that. Is the election still going to happen?" "I think so. We can't let him win." "Why not?" "What if he wrecks everything you fought to build?" "I'm not going to have another heart attack for them. Let him fight the battles for a while. Let him see what it's like to bat your head against a wall and have nothing happen." "I guess. Do you know Belusa and Lydia well enough to talk to? Maybe you could go with me to question them?" "No, thanks. I care for Meg, but I don't want to be involved in this. I'm glad I was 2,000 miles away." I felt deflated. I was grasping for any kind of help, and here was a good friend bailing out on me. I wasn't about to beg either. I said, "Didn't you tell me Jerome was in favor of gay rights?" "I don't remember saying that. I don't know if he was or not." I knew he told me. I wouldn't have misunderstood something like that. I was even more discouraged. At that moment, I saw Todd coming down the hall. He was in his funeral best, although when brighter light caught his outfit, I thought his suit might be deep midnight blue instead of actually black. Todd and Kurt knew each other slightly. We chatted briefly, and then Todd said, "I need to speak to Tom about Meg's case. Will you excuse us?" Kurt gave a friendly wave and walked off. Todd and I entered my classroom. He said, "Tell me exactly everything that you did when you entered this classroom today." He took a yellow legal pad and a fountain pen out of his briefcase. He took notes while I talked. When I finished that, he said, "Now, tell me everything you can remember doing in here since the murder." This was tougher, but I did my best. At the end, I asked, "How much trouble am I in?" "Did you kill him?" "No. Not as much as if you had plonked him." "That's not terribly comforting." "How well do you know this Frank Murphy?" "We're friends." "Well, call him. You'll probably have to deal with the other detectives, but starting with him will be better." Todd stayed in possession of the room. I called Frank. He was at the station. I explained the problem. All he said was, "I'm on my way." He arrived no more than a few minutes later. I introduced Todd. "Called your lawyer first?" Frank asked. "Wouldn't you?" I replied. "Where's the thing?" I pointed with the tip of a pencil. He moved enough books and materials to ascertain something was there. "Don't touch anything." He ushered us into the hallway. He pulled out a portable phone and called the station. He talked to the detectives in charge of the case and to the lab technicians. "This is a mess," Frank said. "I don't enjoy having friends of mine mixed up in murder." Edwina came down the hall. "Why are you all here?" she asked. Todd took over the explanation. "We believe we have discovered a significant clue that applies to the recent murder investigation," Frank said. "The police are gathering information. We'll share whatever we can with school district personnel. We're waiting for the crime scene technicians to get here." "Crime scene?" Edwina said. "What crime? Has there been another killing? Why wasn't I notified?" I said, "Nobody else is dead. If the police are to be called, I should be notified." Edwina talked administrative babble, and Todd replied in lawyer babble for several minutes. When they finished, I asked, "Can we get some kind of security guard down here?" Edwina said, "Security firms have been discussed. I have no idea when a decision will be made about hiring and expenditures. We've had to cut back. Can't we at least get one of those community service custodians to be on duty? Here, keeping watch? We'd have a chance of catching whoever did this." "They're supposed to be working." "Seems to me they're mostly snarling." "What would it hurt to post one of them discreetly down the hall?" "I suppose I could check into it." She left. 2 more detectives in standard issue rumpled suits approached us. Maybe if I was lucky, I could get the rumpled suit concession at the next street fair or opening of the next mall. Business would certainly be steady. The detectives were Leonard Roswald and Baxter Dickinson. They were both about 5'10". Each took off his jacket in the heat, and both were starched white shirts. They expressed no desire to enter the classroom. Thankfully, they were professionals. Always wait for the crime lab. Even I knew that. I gave a statement with Todd standing next to me. All my lawyer had said was, "Tell the story exactly about what has happened in your classroom today." I followed his direction precisely. I said nothing about my outside activities, questioning people and checking the library. I included the parts about the little oddities culminating in the message on the computer. When the cops started to go over it with me again, Todd said, "Once is enough." They stopped. Having a lawyer on retainer can sometimes be a very pleasant thing. The crime lab people arrived. We stayed out in the hall while they went over everything. At one point, they wanted my fingerprints. Todd told me it was okay to comply. Their investigation took them several long, boring hours. For the last 15 minutes, I sat with Todd and Frank in the English office, sipping soda. Frank expressed mild interest in my summer activities, but he seemed mostly cool and distant. His answers to my questions about his family were short and uninformative. Eventually, the 2 detectives came back. Roswald said, "The only obvious prints on the book are yours." So I had touched it before the books fell. Not good. "Nobody else's?" I asked. "Yours were the only ones." "Isn't that kind of odd? It's a well-used book. There should be many more." "There aren't any others." "Is it Jerome's blood?" "Oh, we don't know yet. We presume it is. Can we go over your story again?" "No," Todd said. "He gave you his statement. It was clear, and it is all he knows. We all stared at each other for several minutes. All three detectives retired to a room down the hall. I asked, "Can you tell me anything about what Meg said while you took her home?" "I know you're hurt by what she said, and I wish I could tell you something positive." Attorney-client confidentiality. "Except for giving me directions, she didn't say a word. You know I don't pry or push. She's been through enough right now. Just wait. Right now we need to worry about you." "Am I going to be arrested?" "The first thing I want to know is if that is Jerome's blood or not. That will be the first test." Georgette brought down a message from Scott. She leaned down and whispered, "I stayed late when I saw the police arrive. Are you all right?" "I hope so," I murmured back. "I've got to go home." "It's okay." She patted my arm encouragingly and left. I called Scott and told him what was happening. "Are you in danger?" he asked. "I don't know." "You didn't tell me about all that strange stuff in your classroom." "With you being back in the murder, it didn't really seem important until today. It was just pranks." Before, or possibly forgetfulness, the computer message and the bloody book are real and significant and something that has to be taken care of. "Do you want me to come down there?" "I'll let you know." "I'm glad Todd's there." "Me too." Half an hour later, Frank, the other two detectives, and I sat in the long-since deserted English office. It had been impossible to disguise the presence of the cops in the school. No doubt word was winging through River's Edge of the latest twist in the murder case. I was not happy that I was in the middle of it. Dickinson broke the news. It was Jerome Blenkinsop's blood. The cops all looked at me. I gazed at Todd. A cold shudder ran up my spine. "You want to tell us something?" Baxter said. "He's given his statement," Todd said. I was disappointed that Frank just sat there. I'd hoped for a little more backing. My expectations of Friend's behavior were not coming true today. "Where were you the night of the murder?" Baxter asked. Todd nodded slightly. "I was at home, reading." "You have any proof of that?" "I got a call from my lover about 10 o'clock. "Were you on the phone all night?" Todd said, "I'm sure the phone records will give you the exact times. We'll provide those if you wish." I didn't really wish, but I was not about to contradict my lawyer. Carolyn Blackburn walked in. "Excuse me for interrupting. I had left for the day and gone directly out to do some shopping. I came as soon as I checked my phone messages." The police gave her the scantest of details about what had been found. Carolyn said, "This makes the murder investigation more complicated, doesn't it?" The detectives agreed. "Now what happens?" Carolyn asked. Frank suggested he and the other two detectives meet in the hall for a conference. After they left the room, Carolyn took a seat. "Doesn't this just beat all?" "Yeah," I muttered. I thought about snarling, but why take my frustration out on her? I gave her more details than the cops had. I had 3 calls from board members on my answer machine. Lydia's was the nastiest. She said she was on her way to the school. I didn't see her, but since I'd been forewarned, I didn't come through the central office. "I'd like to talk to her," I said. "Just her and me." She knew Jerome better than anybody. I suspect Jerome was holding out on his people here about the election. I believe Lydia would have information. "Do you think she'll talk to you?" Carolyn said. "I have questions to ask that I don't think the police are going to ask. If I'm free to talk to people, I want to." I turned to Todd. "Are they going to arrest me?" "I doubt it. The presence of only your fingerprints and the absence of any others makes it more difficult for them. Maybe they think I tried to wipe it clean and simply missed some? Plus, they'd have to prove some nefarious connection with you and Jerome. They can't simply arrest all those people who don't have an alibi for that night." Frank came back into the room. He looked at me. "You're free to go. If I was a tough cop in a movie, I'd snarl something about you not leaving town. Everybody loves a snarl." What do you think?" I asked. Frank shook his head. "This is a delicate business," Carolyn interrupted. "I don't want to be present for any kind of legal discussion or anything remotely like it. Can I speak with the detectives who were here? I want to know if we can have our school back." "Yeah," Frank said. She left. "I'm not investigating," Frank said, "but I am a cop. I can be a little more open here for old time's sake. Obviously, we have lots of new questions, which is in your favor and maybe even Meg's. I've asked myself a million of them. The key from our point of view is that if this is the murder weapon, then what have we got in the evidence lockup? Is it still there? Yes, it's been checked. It's the unanswered questions that make the case difficult, and at the moment, impossible to arrest you. Will that free Meg? I don't know. We need to figure out a number of things, like if you and Meg were co-conspirators, why leave fingerprints on one weapon but not the other? Or why not wipe both clean? Or did you simply miss a spot? If you wiped your fingerprints off, why is the blood still there? Why hide one book but not the other? Better yet, why put this one in your room? Storage? Why is it still there? Forgetfulness? Why wait and call the police on yourself several days later? I suggested some of these things to them. Thanks. I felt better that he was working for me a little. Don't thank me. I'm being a good cop. I don't pretend to understand this. I don't think you killed anybody. Tom, don't let your friendship with Meg blind you. She is a good suspect, but this case has certainly turned bizarre. But I haven't done anything. What have you uncovered? I can tell the other detectives after you tell me. The question chilled me. Right then, I wasn't prepared to trust too many old friends. This had been too much a cop question, a possible trick question, a cop offer, the kind the dumbest suspects fall for on NYPD Blue. I didn't like it that he asked. It was almost like a betrayal. He became more cop than friend at that moment. Frank, I think I need to discuss the whole situation with Todd before I say anything. I just went to bat for your butt. I wasn't prepared to explain to him how I really felt. Todd spoke up. Detective, we are fully cooperating. Tom and I need to talk. He said no more, but the conversation with Frank was obviously at an end. He left. Now what? I asked. I go home after having earned another chunk of the retainer you and Scott pay me. What can I tell Frank? You haven't interfered in a police investigation. You've been cooperative, but you don't need to talk to them. I wouldn't trust Frank very much. He's a friend, or I thought he was. You seem to be coming up short in the friend category this afternoon. I thought of Kurt. People don't want to be connected with murder. Frank's a cop. If you find out anything, call me. I strongly suggest a great deal of discretion if you talk to people. I suggest, even more strongly, you let the police handle the case. I didn't kill anybody. I don't think Meg did. I need to find the killer before I get accused. Then realize you will have to talk to the police if you take an active role. I don't think they can make a case against you, but let's err on the side of safety. I couldn't remember how many times Todd had told me this last. I like a nice, conservative, cautious lawyer. I entered the corridor. All the cops were gone. I stopped in my room and picked up my suit, gym bag, and briefcase. The room was not a shambles as far as I could tell. The police had removed only the one book. I was depressed. Frank, a cold and distant cop. Kurt, backing off from helping Meg, openly hostile. I had work to do to keep myself from becoming a suspect of some kind, or even thought of as an accomplice. Carolyn poked her head in my room, then entered. Lydia Marquez is in the school office. She said she wants to talk to you. About what? I'm not sure. I presume it has something to do with the murder. She wouldn't tell me. I'm only the superintendent. I'll bring my lawyer with me. That's up to you, Carolyn said. I'm going to go home. There are several park district functions going on in the building, so you can just leave by any exit. The custodians will be cleaning until 8. Todd and I walked down the corridor together. He still wore his coat and tie. He never seemed to sweat. Maybe he was secretly dead and simply hadn't told the rest of us. I explained about Lydia. Talk to her if you want. Why don't I wait out in the hall, just in case you want me? Give her a chance. See what she has to say. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.